Thank you for joining me this week as we take a look at Scrooge, the 1913 British silent film.
To Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
You will be haunted by three spirits.
I think I'd rather not.
I'm Christmas present. Ho, ho, ho.
You may be a bit of undigested beef, a fragment of an underdone potato.
Scrooge is getting worse.
Bah humbug.
As I said, we are reviewing Scrooge, a film that was first shown in the UK in 1913. 11 years later, the film was released in the United States under the title Old Scrooge. This is one of the earliest surviving feature-length adaptation of A Christmas Carol, directed by Liam Bantock and starring Seymour Hicks as Ebenezer Scrooge. Hicks had already been playing Scrooge on stage since 1901. However, this was his first time bringing the role to film. He would later reprise the character again in 1935 sound version of Scrooge, making him one of the very few actors to portray the character on stage, in the silent films, and in early talkies. This version runs about 40 minutes. It opens in an unusual way. We begin not with Scrooge, but with Charles Dickens himself. We see Dickens pacing in his studies, searching for inspiration. The idea comes to him, and he sits down and writes A Christmas Carol. It's a very literary-themed framing device that attempts to portray reverence to the novel and tries to establish that this is a very serious adaptation of the beloved story. Which is more interesting when you learn this film doesn't actually adapt the original Dickens text so much as it adapts the then popular J.C. Buckstone staged play version, which leads to some major alterations. From there, we move to London and begin to establish just how unpleasant Scrooge is. We see him clash with children outside his office as they harass him for his disdain of Christmas. We then get a paraphrase of the opening text of the Christmas Carol. He then settles into his office and berates Bob Cratchit for being late. We also see Tiny Tim. Notably, he is portrayed as properly small here, which is not always the case in early adaptation. And the film spends a fair amount of time building up the world before we see anything supernatural. We then see Fred giving money to the poor children, and he enters to invite Scrooge to Christmas dinner, which Scrooge quickly turns down. Immediately after Fred leaves, a woman comes along seeking help, and Scrooge similarly turns her away. Bob Cratchit secretly gives her money from his own pocket, causing more derision from Scrooge. Then a charitable gentleman enters, imploring Scrooge to donate to the needy, and for a third time, Scrooge refuses. For an old curmudgeon, he seems to have a never-ending roster of visitors. This is followed by a seemingly juxtaposing moment where Scrooge gives Bob a second-hand quill as a Christmas gift, accompanying by further beratement before sending Bob off for the Christmas holiday, which should explain everything you need to know about Scrooge. And then we begin at one of the major structural differences. Scrooge never leaves. He never goes home. Instead of returning to a dark house, he falls asleep in his counting house chair, which means the entire haunting unfolds within the office itself, giving both the supernatural scene and the film itself a more black box theater film or a bottle episode if it were TV. This is where the film really diverts from the Dickens text. We don't see three ghosts, we only get one, Jacob Marley. This follows Buckstone's adaptation, which condenses the spirits into a single visitation. Marley takes the role of past, present, and future, which we have seen in various other adaptations. Marley appears in burial shroud, his face darkened with hollow cheeks to suggest decay. For 1930, it's reasonably eerie. The ghost effects themselves are created using an early cinematic trick photography, primarily double exposure and superimposition. They would first film the room, Then, restarting the film, they would shoot the ghost actor separately, layering the images together. This resulted in a transparent figure hovering in space. Sometimes they would mask out part of the frame so that the memories would appear in more defined areas, almost like spectral projections forming out of shadows or curtains. What's interesting in this version? Scrooge doesn't physically travel anywhere. He often just walks from one part of the room to the other, and the visions appear within the office. It's much more contained than we generally see. Marley shows him visions of his lonely childhood, his lost love Belle, the Cratchit family dinner, Tiny Tim's eventual death, and then ends with Scrooge's own lonely grave. All this unfolds very quickly once the haunt begins. The film spends a significant longer time setting up Scrooge's miserliness than it does showing the vision. And then just as abruptly, the transformation occurs. Scrooge repents quickly. He runs out, throws money to poor children from his window. He sends for a large turkey for the Cratchit. There's even this weird vision of him joining them for Christmas lunch, which is apparently just all in his head. Because it's a silent film, Seymour Hick's performance is very over the top. He's been playing Scrooge on the stage for over a decade at this point, and the stage style carries over to this version. The emotions are expressed physically, dramatically, all conveyed through large gestures and expressive movements. Technically speaking, the film's very static, the camera doesn't move, much of it feels very stage-bound. But for 1913, the ghost effects are ambitious, and it has general eeriness, and it definitely portrays the story. It may not be the most emotionally deep or visually dynamic version of A Christmas Carol, but it does represent one of the earliest attempts to bring the story to screen, which makes it worth watching. With that said, this has been this week's visit to Ebenezer Scrooge. I'll see you next time for another ghostly rewatch.
Now just go, but be here all the earlier the next day.